All right, we are live. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Check Service Industry Podcast, where we talk about all things service industry related and whatever else I feel like talking about. I am Reyshan Parker, and if you haven't yet, please go watch my television series now streaming on Amazon Prime and Tubi TV about some fantastic chef-owned and operated restaurants. If you are listening to this, you could have been listening earlier live on Tastemade. We record weeks in advance, and if you would like to ask my guests questions, please follow us on Tastemade Beyond the Check, and you can hang out with my guests too. It's a real thing. I have a fantastic one today. She is a strength coach. She has overcome many obstacles in her life to become the fantastic woman that she is today. Ladies and gentlemen, introduce Coach Kris Wilkins.
Hi, thanks for having me. This is going to be a good time. Any day I get to talk about food is a good day.
Which is, every day.
It should probably be every day, right?
Well, it's almost impossible to avoid, at least.
What do you think?
Talking about it at some point during the day.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to somebody earlier this morning about this idea that like food addiction is a problem. And I thought, well, but then oxygen addiction must be a problem too, right? Because you can't exactly live without it. So
that water addiction's getting me right now.
It's really hard. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for
having me.
Have
it every day. Every day, at least theoretically 6 glasses of it.
At least, right?
At least. But we talk about, what are you going to have for lunch? What do you want for lunch? What are you going to have for dinner? What do you want for breakfast?
Yeah. As a mom of a household, it's definitely the top 3 questions I ask a day. What are you going to have for breakfast? What are you going to have for lunch? What's for dinner? What do you want for dinner?
And the other way around. What are we having for breakfast? What are we having for lunch?
Yeah. Nobody asks me that, actually. I think they just sort of are like, yeah, that's just your thing. You go do it. So I always have to be pulling it out of them.
They just assume you're going to be making them something delicious.
Mm-hmm. They do.
Well, that's on you.
Yeah, it is totally my fault. I'm working on it. I've been working on it this year a little bit. So.
Well, since we're there, what are we making the kids for breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Oh, actually, my daughter is kind of on her own for breakfast now. She likes to cook. She's super duper into it. She really wants to be a chef when she grows up, and she loves baking. So it's kind of like a fun thing for her to get to do, is to make her own breakfast. Sometimes it's pretty solid. Sometimes she doesn't feel like it, but I think that's how everybody feels, really.
Right, but she's working up to take your position from you, though.
I hope so. That's the goal, right?
Fingers crossed.
I think we're only a couple of years away, really.
Count down the minutes.
Right.
What does she make when she makes breakfast?
Lately she's been doing smoothies because she wants to be able to wander around while she's having breakfast. So yeah,
a woman on the go.
Before that, she was pretty obsessed with French toast. That was like her go-to thing because it was easier than pancakes and slightly less messy, but still tasted like, pancake type stuff. Mm-hmm. So she was very into that.
I love French toast.
Yeah, it's hard to go wrong.
I don't make it that often. I hardly ever make French toast, and I don't know why. It's so easy.
I think it's just one of those things. I'm a nutrition coach as well. I don't just coach strength, but as a nutrition coach, it's like once you start working on balancing out your meals, it gets hard to justify a plate full of French toast very often. Like, it's good for fun, right? Like, and you can do it once in a while, but it usually involves other things too.
I think the frozen waffle is really what has kept me away from the French toast for so long, because
yeah, it's working for my daughter too, the frozen waffle, honestly.
It's just there. And now they have the big fat fluffy ones. Like they do. And those are really good.
I mean, honestly.
The blueberry ones are always sold out though. It's very disappointing to me. Do you notice that? I don't know if you
I know she's the one.
You probably stay out of that
aisle. She's the one that kind of did. I think there's blueberry in the freezer at the moment, but she's off that for now. She's on smoothies. So.
Touche. It's good for you smoothies. Is there kale in those smoothies?
No, never. Kale is horrible. So, fun fact, did you know who the number 1 buyer of kale used to be? Pizza Hut. And it was actually and nobody ever thinks of this, but those salad bars they used to have were garnished with kale. And so they were the number 1
Not the actual
buyer.
salad, though. The salad didn't have kale. I don't remember. No, but they just garnished.
Kale. It was just what was around the bowls.
The healthiest thing at the salad bar, and it was just to look at.
Yep. Well, it's debatable whether it's really the healthiest thing at the salad bar, but
At Pizza Hut salad bar.
yeah. Well, again, who knows, right? Like, it could be.
I love kale. I love kale.
Yeah, that's good.
Because I care about me and you.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I know. I used to sneak kale into everything for my wife because when we first met, she wasn't big on it. Now she'll just straight up eat a kale salad. She's totally fine with it now.
Huh.
But in the beginning, I would just chop it up real fine, right? And
Yeah.
I put it in the spinach salad. So like she couldn't pick it out.
I actually have a really hard time digesting it. My body doesn't like it at all, so I don't know.
No, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Everybody's got their things, right? I don't really like how it
They
tastes
do.
either, so it's kind of a win-win.
I don't like tomatoes.
There you go. Yeah, so I remember we were talking about that last time, huh? Tomatoes are not for you.
No.
Which
they're
must be hard as somebody who travels around because, like, tomatoes are in everything.
right. Like,
Yeah. Like,
I
number
mean, I
one
like
ingredient.
everything that has the tomatoes, but like, I can't
Raw
pop the
ones.
cherry tomato.
Yeah.
It's like a disgusting gusher.
I could see how that would work.
You remember gushers? Are those still a thing? I don't know. I don't buy candy anymore, but
I don't know. We don't buy very much candy. Like, it's Easter, so there's candy around right now because we really love the Trader Joe's jelly beans. That's like our thing.
oh, we don't have a Trader Joe's in Savannah.
Sad.
I know.
Sad. I mean, some of their stuff is awesome. Some of it's just vegetables and food, which you can't get anywhere. So,
Yeah, but it's Trader Joe's. It's just cooler if you shop there. Right?
it was cheaper as well when I was living in California. Like, people used to say, "Oh, Trader Joe's," and I was like, "No, actually, like, I spent way less than if I went to a Ralph's going to a Trader Joe's to like stock up for the week." So it was oftentimes, it's perceived, I think, as like a higher end grocery store, but in some places, particularly, it's actually cheaper. So
It's like Aldi's. Aldi's
Yeah.
is the fancy. But they don't have bags. You have to buy your own bags and you have to rent the cart. So that's
yeah, well, that's Europe though, right? Like, anywhere in Europe, you don't get carts for free. You got to have your Euro coin to plunk in there. They make tokens actually as well that you can use that just like they're not worth anything, but they're the exact right size. And so you can have like a little token instead of having to have a Euro coin on you.
Is that cheating? Is that like hopping the turnstile?
It feels like cheating, but it's great. I still have a couple, I think, somewhere, but obviously there's no use for them over here.
Well, let's talk about you for a minute. Tell me about the history of you, how you got into doing what you do, if you don't mind.
Yeah, oh gee, it's a convoluted path kind of to what I ended up doing. I was actually in college, I studied anthropology, cultural anthropology, and French, which, pretty much everybody thought was going to be very useless until I moved to France and proved them all wrong and said, haha, this is what you do with that degree. So that's what I did. And I started teaching languages. I really, really loved teaching languages for a long time. And it got me into cross-cultural training, which used a lot of my cultural anthropology stuff. So I was helping families or people who were traveling for work integrate into different company cultures or just like local cultures. Can you hear my cat?
Is that a cat? I wasn't sure if it was the cat or the kids.
No, my husband has closed his door because he's also on a call. So he is desperate to go in my husband's office right now. And I think he just wants a little bit of attention. So sorry about that.
Kitty.
I know, it's funny. We were on a podcast previously and John was joking about my cats and they made 0 appearances. So I think they're going to make up for it today. But
that's all right.
Yeah,
Bones. Oh, there he is.
so after that, you got the dog.
Yep, got a dog.
Hello, puppy.
There's a doggy. You hear the kitty? He's like, no, you have headphones on, Dad. I can't hear anything.
I have no idea what you're talking about, right? So
He's
yeah,
just
so
Anyway,
I spent
back
10
to
years,
you.
That's okay. I spent 10 years abroad and I traveled a bit. I lived in France and then we lived in the Czech Republic after I met my husband. We moved over there and I was the manager of instruction at a language school. But all the while I was always really into lifting. So I played soccer most of my growing up years and into college and all of that, but I wasn't good enough to get anywhere professional with it. So I started doing Taekwondo instead, I couldn't kick a ball, I figured I'd kick other things, right? Like, so, which led me to bodybuilding, because I needed to be able to do a certain amount of push-ups to get my black belt, and I needed to start lifting heavier to do it. So that started my path in the strength world. And at the time, there weren't a lot of women lifting because I'm old, and so the only chick in the weight room at college was definitely a thing. But I really, really loved it. And when I was living abroad, I ended up getting lots of people into working out and started kind of training them, even though I wasn't actually a trainer there, because you have to have a 2-year degree. And you can't do that on a student visa, on a work visa. I would have had to switch and come home and go back as a student, which wasn't going to work because I had to work to live. So I couldn't do it while I was there. And when we had the opportunity to move back to the US, I was like, great, now I'm going to do it. So I shifted careers around my 30s, early 30s, into fitness. And I started out as a personal trainer at a 24-hour fitness. And I thought, this is going to be great.
How many pull-ups can you do?
Currently, I just had rotator cuff surgery last year, so 3. But my lifetime max was 13. So
nice.
I can do 2. Actually, that's a good amount,
2.
Actually. I mean, how often do you practice?
Just whenever somebody is talking about how many pull-ups somebody can do, and there happens to be a bar somewhere nearby where you could actually do that. Yeah. We test it.
Yeah. As long as you can maintain that too, you're killing it, right? Like, go down to 1 though, you might have to come see me.
Jordan, none. She can do none.
Yeah, it's harder. And I'm not just saying that from like a women to men strength ratio. It's harder because women's geometry is slightly different in their upper body. So it takes a little bit more focus to get women doing
It's like
pull-ups.
There's a stopper there that just says, nah, this isn't really a thing that you do unless you work at it really, really hard.
Yeah, you have to work towards it for sure. It took a couple of years for me to get solid, consistent pull-ups. So it was a bit of a shame when I lost them there for a year or 2, but they're back, sort of.
They're back
on it. So
what we're saying is, ladies, nobody should ever be ashamed that you can't do a pull-up if you're a lady.
No, but it is definitely achievable. I think this is the idea that like, oh, well, I can't do it and I'll never be able to do it. But it's like anything, right? If you show up and you're consistent and you put the effort in, you can get there.
Chin above the bar.
It's pretty rewarding too when you finally do it. You're like, oh, yes. So yeah, pull-ups. So I went from kind of being a trainer at 24, and I kind of came into fitness hoping it was going to solve all of my problems, because obviously everybody in fitness knew everything that I needed to know, and they were going to tell me how to do everything. And I got in there and I thought, hey, wait a second. This isn't so well organized. Like, this is actually not what I was expecting. And then I got an opportunity to run a large facility in LA, which had like all of the things that a regular Globo Fitness gym would have. So it had a spin room, and it had an MMA program. It had hot yoga. We had a regular group exercise thing. We had personal trainers. We did all of it.
Everything.
Right? It was great. It was a super cool opportunity to start to build into health and fitness what I expected there to be, which was a focus on genuinely on people's health and improving their well-being. Because by that point, I'd actually transitioned over to also being a certified nutrition coach with Precision Nutrition. And so
nice.
So it kind of has evolved into this more like deep health coaching thing that I'm focused on at this point, because you can't just focus on one area of the
all around health
journey. Yeah, which is why food is so important, right? And I think what you're doing with Beyond the Check is awesome, because it's such a huge part of who we are, what we eat.
And you are a breadth of knowledge that is about to blow my mind with things. I am sure of it, because
no pressure.
I don't know all those things about the way that food actually works on our bodies and the physiological, differences that occur between what we eat and what we shouldn't eat.
Yeah, it's like, I wish it was simple. I wish I could just be like, here's the 30-second soundbite of what you need to do. But like, unfortunately, because we're all physiologically unique, not one thing works for everyone, right? Which is why there are a million diet books, right? If you Google it, there's literally over 1 million results for different diets. And there's no ability to prove any one of them is better than another, because it's very challenging when you have different physiological things. And food is not simple, right? Like we don't just eat out of necessity. Food is part of our culture. It's part of our heritage. It's part of our coping strategy, like how we manage emotions. Oftentimes food is a big part of that. So trying to simplify it down to like, here's your diet plan and hit your macros usually doesn't work super well for people.
When I'm having a bad day, or I just feel like I deserve something special, right? It's like, I'm going to Burger King.
Yeah. And it's like a perfectly, there must be a reason for that. Right?
Even though,
so why Burger King?
Because I never have it, and it's like it's like my childhood memory, like favorite, like char grilled burger. I don't put cheese on it. It's just the Whopper. It's the Whopper. It's in my head. I've gone back and tried a Big Mac just for funsies, like in my older. Gross, dude. That thing is nasty.
I do think it's changed a lot since we were kids as well. I don't think they're the same burgers they were.
No, right? Do not eat that.
No.
Or anything, like people have their own special treats, right? And some people's special treats are healthier than others. My mother's is sliced tomatoes with brown sugar and pepper.
Really? That's interesting. And you don't like tomatoes, huh?
No.
So, and I think this is, and this is one of the things that's really interesting about working with people on nutrition is that like, there's always what you said, right? Which is like, oh, when I was a kid, this was a food that really meant something to me, or that had a place, or that I had on this specific day or holiday, or for this reason, or my mom always made me, mine is over easy eggs whenever I was sick. Yeah.
Mine too.
Really? Nobody
runny eggs and toast, man. That was the go-to when we were sick. That's what we got. And I just find it so comforting.
Yeah, still to this day, right? Because you kind of built that neurological pathway of like this equals feeling better. And so, trying to get people to change what they consume or why they consume it is really, really, it's a very big ask. It's not straightforward because there's so much emotional linkage to what we actually consume, which is why we have a million like amazing chefs in the world trying to create this emotional connection for us with food.
And just watching, you can be in a room with 20 people and you can have all these different dishes and people, it's just amazing the diversity of, oh, I don't like that. Oh my God, how do you not like it? It's so good. And oh, I tried, not for me, but somebody else thinks it's the best thing ever, right? And it's just, we're all over the place.
Yeah, well, and that's the beauty of being an omnivore, right? Like, if you were a cat, it would be like, I'll just eat that meat all the time. It's probably a lot less exciting to be a cat. Right?
I don't know. Cats are pretty finicky.
Yeah, right? Like they're missing out on a huge opportunity, I think.
I know cats that'll turn their nose at tuna fish, right? They're just like, that's not what I had when I was a kitten.
Right. All three of mine are actually, they have very different preferences. Like my older cat absolutely loves steak. My boy cat is obsessed with these like freeze-dried chicken bites. The other two won't touch them. And then like my super adventurous young female cat is like obsessed with the cheapest, crappiest treats at Target, right? Like she just literally screams her face off for those and nobody else really wants those. So, even in the animal kingdom, our preferences are highly individual.
They're all over the place.
Yeah.
My Bones is super picky. He won't eat anything but like his fresh pet. And even that needs to have like a little something, like some actual like leftover chicken or some hamburger or just something to make it not boring to him, I guess. And then my other dog will eat anything. Carrots, kale, whatever. She's fine. If it's edible and she can chew it, she'll eat it. But
I had a Dalmatian like that. She would actually beg for bananas. It was very weird. She could hear one opening, which is pretty like it's pretty tuned in, but you could not eat a banana in the house without her being immediately present and yelling at you like, like making
really like bananas,
like judgmental sound about bananas. Yeah.
What kind of dog?
She was a Dalmatian.
Oh, she was Dalmatian. You
said. Yeah, super high energy. That dog was a full-time job.
maybe it was all the potassium pumping through her veins.
Must have been, right? She was like, I'm an endurance athlete. Let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because if you eliminate food variety from people, They usually get pretty depressed. You have two doggies. That one's tiny.
This is a visitor. This is Bones' best friend, Teddy. He comes, we babysit him. So.
Oh, that's nice.
That's
Your
Ted.
dog has friends.
He does.
Nice, complete social circle.
They will hump the day away together.
Awesome.
They're a little gay.
I don't want to ask which way around it goes because they're kind of very different sizes.
They take turns. They take turns.
Okay, well, that's fair.
It's fair.
That's equal opportunity, right? Like.
It is. Anyway. But so when I try to I try to change my tastes, right? Like, and it doesn't take that long, I don't think, to get the whole salt and sugar thing out of our system. To when we do try it again, it's overwhelming. You know what I mean? Like if you give up something for about 2 weeks, and then you try to have a chocolate chip cookie, and you haven't had any chocolate chip cookies in 2 weeks, you're like, oh my God, it's so sweet.
Yeah, and it's really, we're still evolved to eat really natural food. And we live in a world of highly processed, highly palatable foods that have been created to hit all those pleasure centers in our brain. And it is pretty amazing what happens if you manage to eliminate a lot of that stuff for a couple of weeks. You go back to it and you're like, whoa, it's like overload, right?
Mm-hmm.
And over time, even from when I was a kid to now, I can see that just the basic recipe for chocolate chip cookies, like the sugar quantity has increased. Right? Nothing else in the actual recipe is increased, but they're adding more and more sugar because people's palates are changing because of the highly palatable foods.
And we need more sweetness.
And we need more sweetness to taste it.
I remember that cookies were just kind of, they weren't sure. The sweetness was in the additives, like the chocolate chips.
Chocolate chips, yeah.
Right? But the dough itself was, kind of relatively bland. Like the thin crispy cookies, they're still kind of like that,
Yeah, it's the flour to sugar ratio, right? The flour fat sugar ratio makes whether or not you have the fluffy cookie or the thin crispy cookie.
So the thin crispy cookies might be better for us.
Well, again, I think it's always a tricky thing to say what's better for you or what's not better for you, right? Like if you are an endurance athlete, that really sugary cookie is probably a really good thing to eat.
Because it's going to last you.
Because it's going to give you immediate energy that you're
using. In the long run.
Right. If you don't use a lot of energy over a long period of time, then probably a lower sugar option is going to be better for you. Right?
Right.
Because this is the thing, whenever we try to be like, fat is good, sugar is bad, protein is good, carbs are bad, whenever we do that.
All I hear now is that you hear everything. You hear fat's good, right? And sugar's bad, but then sugar's not so bad for you, and it's actually the meat that's killing us, right? So one of these two things is giving us diabetes, and it just goes back and forth on which one it is. And I think it might be both, guys.
Well, it's actually neither and both, right? Because we try to separate these things out into very simplistic, this is good, this is bad. And whenever we do that kind of black and white thinking about our bodies or our environments, it usually doesn't pan out super well. And so it's really more of a how well are you moving? How often are you moving? Right? That can tell us how much energy we probably need, at least roundabout, right? And then how well are we recovering and sleeping? Because those things affect our hormones, which affect our appetite, which affect our movement. So if you only ever look at food or macronutrients in food, you're sort of missing the whole picture of what that food does and how it functions within the ecosystem of our existence. So, oftentimes people say, just tell me what to eat. And it's like, well, I can't just tell you I can do that, right? I can tell you this is the optimal amount of food for a person of approximately your height, weight, age, and gender. But whether that applies to you or not, it's anybody's guess. If I don't know what your exercise habits are like, if I don't know what your job looks like, do you have a really intense physically taxing job? Or are you doing a really intense mental job? Because that burns calories too. Right? How well are you sleeping? Do you get interrupted every 2 hours sleeping? Do you have babies or puppies or things that wake you up every 2 hours? Or do you live in a noisy neighborhood? These things affect all of our energy usage and how our bodies process energy. So I can give you a meal plan, right? But it probably isn't going to be tailored specifically enough for you to see change or results. And you might not stick to it because I'm going to go on a limb and say that somebody's probably told you what you should eat before.
Oh, everybody tells you what you should or shouldn't eat.
Right. Do you do that?
I mean, no. I mean,
No.
I think I have a pretty balanced diet. Like, I eat junk food, right? I eat Wendy's. I go to Burger King every once in a while. But we also have kale salads like at least 4 times a week with dinner. And we make dinner I make dinner. I make dinner almost every night.
Yeah.
And I pack lunches and I eat a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for just to get through the day, right? Healthy peanut butter, not like Jif, but the no sugar added, with the oil, and you still gotta make a mess of it.
The inconvenient stuff. Yeah. I mean, and I think it's interesting because if I told you the healthiest diet you could possibly have is 100% tomato based. Raw tomatoes. Raw tomatoes are absolutely the best food you could eat.
What if you told me that?
Yeah, what if I told you that?
Oh, well, I'd be like, well, I guess
I'm not going to be healthy.
I guess I'm not going to be healthy.
Right. And that's actually what you see because, again, food is super linked to our feelings and our environment and our families and our emotions and all of this stuff. So even if I told you what the absolute perfect diet was, you'd have 25 personal reasons why you wouldn't do it.
Damn it.
Not that, you can't make changes. I'm saying you can make changes, but you have to make changes within your own preferences. Right. So one of the big things that I do in my practice is you never have to eat a food you don't like. That's never have to do that. Right. There's no food that is the only food that you need to eat to achieve whatever goal it is you've got.
If you don't like quinoa, you can have oats.
Yeah, you can have, there's 15 different grains that come to mind right away that you can have instead of quinoa. You don't want to eat grains? Okay, let's find out how to get that energy some other way. Yeah.
Couscous is a pasta, right?
It is a pasta. Most people think it's a grain, though, don't they?
Mm-hmm. They do.
Yeah, it's not. It's wheat-based. Yeah, but it's the staple, right? I think wheat gets a bad rap nowadays too, because it's been the staple grain of civilization forever, right? We have bread and wheat to thank for cities and communities, and so the fact that we demonize it now is, I find, really ironic.
And the beer.
Yeah, and the beer. Beer is big.
I'm married to a beer and the bread. It was beer and bread. Yeah, that's what we
liquid
made.
Bread, right? Mm-hmm. It was bread and liquid bread.
But I think our grains were far superior back then.
Well, they were just less changed.
Right.
We've changed things a lot. I think that's the thing we haven't really fully researched yet, is the effect of all the changes we've made to the plants. Because people are always like, oh, no GMO, but it's we've been modifying crops for thousands of years to make them better for certain climates, to make them yield more, to make them more pest resistant. We've been messing around with crops forever.
Right. I think it's the speed at which we need to produce, which kind of brings down the quality of our food and our bread, right? A
part of it, yeah.
A Wonder Bread is just, probably the crappiest wheat that you could find that was, bleached and then blah, 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 boom, it's Wonder Bread.
Yeah.
But if you eat good bread, that bread the seeds had to actually sprout slightly, right? And it had to take time.
They may have grown in soil that has more nutrients in it as well. And I think this is the thing, because we're over farming the same crops on the same land. We're not following a lot of the traditions of farming that we need to be farming to protect the soil. So that decreases the nutrient density of our food over time.
All the way up to the steak.
All the way up to the steak. And to you, right? Because, you can only take from the food what's in it.
All the way to the human.
Yeah. It's it is a big ecosystem, right? We can't separate ourselves out from it. I think that's the mistake we've made recently. It's trying to say oh, we can do better than this. We can fix it.
Well, we grow it in a lab. It's fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're growing meat in a lab. Have you seen this?
I have. I'm actually pretty into it.
Yeah. Have you tried it?
I haven't tried it yet. We can't try it in the U.S. yet. But they did the test in Singapore, and I think it is starting to spread more. But I watched an episode of a cooking show, and David Chang tried it, and he said it's just like chicken. Tastes just like chicken.
Cooks like chicken.
cooks. I mean, it is chicken. It's just a grown cell culture, right? So
Right.
it is chicken. It's just you just grew part of a chicken, not the entire chicken. You didn't need the brain. You didn't need the heart. You didn't need the rest of it. So you just, I don't know how nutritional that is. You know what I mean? Or if it makes a difference, like what chicken you take the cells from. You know, do you need a farm?
I mean,
do you need
I
a
hate
farm
to say
raised
it's chicken and egg.
What?
It is a little bit chicken and egg, though, right? Like, because
What came
what
first?
did they feed those cell cultures to get them to reproduce, right? Like, because there has to be some kind of energy input, or it's not going to make more. So
Right.
if you think about like the entire organism, what the entire organism consumes becomes what the organism is, right? Does that make sense?
And
I
we,
think that hangs together,
uh-huh,
right? So if you've just got cells in a dish, and we
just
as like
replicating.
people who study nutrition science will be the first ones to stand up and say, like, if like this represents all of the nutrition knowledge there is to know in the entire universe, like we know like this much. We studied like this much. And so the idea that we can isolate out protein cells, you know, and like grow them in a lab, and then that's equivalent to what has happened in the process of like a living organism's life cycle, I think is really scary, honestly, because we don't know what we don't know here. You know,
I mean,
it's
I'm not
like,
against it because I think that is probably the future. You know, like I mean, not to say the Earth does a beautiful, fantastic, perfect job of it on its own, right? But if we're going to Mars, you know, if we're going to change the way that we do things on Earth, then we kind of need the science to back it up. And even if that science is telling us that, you know, we need to farm better and the science of farming needs to be improved, you know, and at the same time if people aren't willing, like replicators, right? Star Trek, the replicator. You push a button, it makes whatever you want. And
out
that's
of what though? That's always been my question. What are they making that out of? Like, where did that, what components do they have? And it's funny
well,
because
here's
I don't think I mentioned it before or at any time when we were talking, but my husband just stopped working for SpaceX. He was actually on the Raptor engine project and was working on
really.
Starship. Yeah, really. So this is a big topic in our house of like, okay, fine, we get there. And then what? Like, because then we have to sustain life. And there's this whole like bacteria world that like really, really we don't understand well enough yet and how it actually affects human health, right? We're just barely starting to look at things like gut biome and what's going on in there and how many millions of different types of bacteria we have in our gut and what their jobs are and how they affect our emotions. And, you know, it's like when you actually think about the practicalities of trying to go and live on Mars, it's freaking mind blowing, right? Like and believe me, this is dinner table conversation for us on far too many occasions.
Oh
So,
boy, I want in on
yeah.
this.
Yeah. And so, you know, it's like, there are people working on this kind of stuff, right? There are people working on creating seed banks and all of this data around what kind of food and plants we have on Earth and animals too, right? There are people working on that. And then figuring out how we're going to transfer that if we do become a multiplanetary species. But it's going to take a lot of effort. Like it's an unbelievable amount of like effort to
I
make
think
this a reality.
it is, but without that trial, without that innovation, we would just be stuck on Earth continuing to destroy the place. And
Yeah.
with the idea of needing to go to a place where we need to conserve every single thing that we do, like, you know, living on Dune, you know, every drop of water counts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we take that for granted here. But in our thinking of doing it somewhere else, or the innovation necessity of like of scarcity, right? And finally trying to accept the fact that we actually have scarcity on
Yes.
Earth, but we it's in such a big platform and we have so much that we can't see the forest from the trees.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really important concept in this century for us as a species to get that like resources are finite, right? We used to not occupy enough of the planet or require enough of the resources on the planet for it to be an issue. They felt like endless, right? It felt endless. We could just endlessly create trash and endlessly create you know, new products and use resources with no consequences. And I think we're coming to the point where that's the case. And I think even going to Mars, we're still going to face that reality. right?
Oh,
That's a harsher reality out there than it is here, even because there we don't know what we're going to be able to exploit on Mars and what we're not.
no, but all the things that we're building or inventing for that, we can reapply to Earth,
Exactly.
right?
Right. It's
And then we
actually
make Earth a better place vis-a-vis trying to live on a place that is completely unlivable.
so it seems like you kind of like sci-fi, right? Have you watched The Expanse?
I did watch The Expanse, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like the most realistic version of what space might be like. And you look at the Belters, right, who were out in the asteroid belt mining and what their lives were like versus what the humans on Earth lives were like. It's like, oh, we could totally perpetuate some of these things if we don't fix them before we decide to go
Hmm.
somewhere else, right?
Yeah, I mean, one little accident out there and everybody's dead. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that used to be the case on Earth, though, too. And, when we look at human evolution, this is a unique period of time for human beings right now because it is a period of relative abundance, right? Everything feels very safe. And, for the most part, people have shelter, people have at least some nutrition, and, water still, we're struggling to make sure everybody has water.
I think 75% of the population has a cell phone.
Yeah. And not 75% of the population has water, right? So that says a lot about our priorities, doesn't it? And it's like when you start looking at things from this perspective, and then you're individually coaching nutrition with people, you're like, actually, you can go to Wendy's sometimes. It's fine, right? Like in the scheme of things, it's fine. It's really more of a like, how does that fit into the bigger picture of how you interact with your body on a bigger scale? Like, how well are you taking care of your body as a whole? How well are you taking care of the bodies around you, the people in your life, right? That also consume air and water and food and all these things, and how well are they thriving? And then you can step it out from there, right? John and I have been working on this idea of this expansive model for change, right? Because it's like it can and does start with personal development, with being able to say, I take very good care of myself, so I have enough to take care of somebody else, right? And I think that's how we get
Hmm.
out of this is saying, like, on an individual level, like, what do I need? What do I actually need to be healthy? And
Love
then,
yourself
yeah,
so you can love those around you,
yeah,
so you can love your community, so we can love the world.
right. And I mean, that sounds very kumbaya, but it's what it is, right? Like,
No, it's totally true.
yeah,
You have to have compassion for yourself before you can have compassion for others.
yeah,
If you can't take care of yourself and eat in a way that makes you feel good, how can you possibly feed other people and make them feel good?
yeah. And I think this is something that's not always highlighted about the restaurant industry or the chef industry itself, right? Like, I have a lot of people in my family work in restaurants, and I worked in restaurants all in my 20s and teens and everything. I think my first job, I think I was 13 working in a pizza place, like, and that was the beginning of many, many, many jobs in restaurants. And so, when you actually look at what people are doing in single owner restaurants, it's love, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
passion project. When you start your own
Yep.
restaurant and you want to share your food with people, that's what it's about. I think chefs are some of the most powerful people in our community to help us improve this.
So true. It's that's I mean that's why I go find chef-owned restaurants, because I wanted to do the opposite of like kitchen nightmares and find the
Yeah.
ones who were doing it right and who, really nailed their seasonal menus and everything
Yeah.
is as local as it can be, and and it's theirs. It's, they're there all the time. It's, it's not a corporation. They don't have multiple restaurants. They're not award-winning, renowned, you know, chefs around the world. They're just, they're the community's, heart and soul.
Yeah. And you can taste it in the food, right? I've watched some of your videos on the different people that you've interviewed, and it's just like you can hear it and you can feel it in the chefs that you're interviewing, how much they love what they're doing, and they just want everybody to know how easy it is, right? They think it's easy, but like how accessible making really great tasting healthy food is. Because I think this has been a
Hmm.
really big shift in the restaurant industry in the past 10 years, especially in America, is
Oh
towards
yeah.
like this local sourced, like nutrient dense, high quality food that's about family and friends and people sharing like calories together, right? Because calories are life.
Hmm. And the Applebees are dropping like flies.
They are, thank goodness, right? Did you say there was a John Oliver we were just watching last night, and I think it was on the Ukraine, and I guess they were running a Ukraine story on CNN, and like it accidentally cut to an Applebee's commercial like right in the middle, and it was like the most horrible thing ever. It was so inappropriate, right? And it was like you didn't have to ask anybody why that was so upsettingly inappropriate, right? But it was, and you just thought, ugh. Gross. And Applebee's actually apologized. Like they wrote to CNN and were like, this was really bad and we're really sorry. And
I mean, was it,
like, how
it can't be Applebee's fault. They're not in charge of hitting the button to play the commercial. You know, like,
no, it was
that's someone in a switcher at CNN.
Like fell asleep maybe and just like,
did I hit the Applebee's button? Did I hit the Applebee's button? Oh,
it was horrifying, right? But we all inherently know it's important. Right. We all inherently know how important food and food quality is. It's just whether or not we have access.
I mean, you think?
I think
like everybody.
I think knowledge and action are not the same thing. I've never had a client once where they didn't fundamentally understand what healthy eating looked like.
And they just weren't doing it, knowing that you're not doing it.
Yeah.
Beating yourself up because you know, right?
Right. There's always some guilt or shame that comes along with knowing you're not doing the thing that you should be doing. And sometimes it's access, right? There are legitimate food deserts where people don't have access to fresh food or to produce, which is a problem, right? But none of those people I've ever worked with, I worked in LA, you know, like I came into contact with everyone along the socioeconomic spectrum. Because we lived sort of on the cusp of like the really, really affluent areas and the not so affluent areas, which are not far apart in LA. Like people sort of, I think if you've never been there and you haven't seen it, it's 2 blocks, right? You can go 2 blocks west or 2 blocks north from some really affluent neighborhood and be in some very, very sad environments where people are really suffering and struggling and they don't have access. And food is prohibitively expensive. Like quality food is expensive in the U.S. You know,
yeah, you don't. People are always like, it costs so much to shop in the produce section.
Yeah.
And I find that fruits tend to be excessively expensive. Yeah. But the vegetables, I don't feel like, you know, I can get a bunch of kale for $1.
Yeah. And
This is not unexpensive, you know, and you can do so many things with it except for you.
It depends. It depends though, because $1 for a bunch of kale doesn't seem expensive if you're only feeding yourself. But if you're trying to feed 4 people and you can spend $1 and get 10 packets of ramen because they're 10 cents each, which one are you going to do?
I think the kale fills you up more.
For a short period of time though. And so I think these are the trade-offs we're asking people to make, you know, I was on TikTok and there was this girl who was basically had moved to the US. I think she was from Uganda and she'd moved to the US and she was like appalled because she couldn't believe how much more expensive it was to eat healthy than the other way around. Because that's not been her experience growing up in a different place. Was basically healthy food was super cheap. And if you wanted a hamburger and fries, it was like a big deal. It was a splurge.
I mean, there's so much more that has to go into that hamburger and fries in reality, right? It's just that we produce and they buy on such a high scale that it makes it cheap. But the truth is that even the science, they paid a test kitchen somewhere to make that for them, right?
Absolutely.
To begin with. So that was who knows how much money. And then, you know, just the distribution process, all the trucking, all the, you know, to move the one hamburger all the way from Mexico to New Jersey.
Yeah.
Right.
It's amazing that the math works out that way, you know, and it does. That's just how much of it they're creating, how much they're, you know, they're pouring into it. If we did that with vegetables, with fruit and vegetable marketing, like,
but at the same time,
farmers wouldn't be going out of business, right? Like,
right?
We'd be having this problem.
I talked to a spice guy. It'll air in a couple weeks, but well, it would have aired a couple weeks ago from this point, but whatever. About
I haven't been doing any recording in the past couple of weeks either. It's been a bit of a dry spell.
He travels the world and finds small spice farmers. So he broke the spice chain, the spice distribution chain. And so he revolutionized the spice trade in the modern age by going
Awesome.
directly to the farmers and bringing the spice and selling it through his company, right, directly. So there is no all those
Middleman.
middlemen. And I think there's a couple websites and apps and things trying to do that whole farmer thing too,
Yeah.
right? Like getting the group of farmers together so they can sell direct boxes, right? And so they're trying, I think.
Yeah, and I think it needs that kind of disruption, right? Because it's such a massive infrastructure in place to keep things the way that they are. It's hard, right? It's really
Right?
hard to
Like
change.
farmersmarket.com. Where is
Right.
that? Right? Or just
Right.
a list of farmers from around the world, and I mean, and then it's on them to ship too, though, right? So that becomes so they have to want to do it, right? And then the same for these spice people around the world. They weren't all into it. They
Right.
liked the way that it was. They didn't care that they would get paid more money. It was more of a pain for them to transition their business model
Right.
than it was to just keep doing what they were used to.
And what a fantastic example of why change can be difficult, right? Because it's like it seems very straightforward. Like it seems like we could all agree on why something should be done a certain way, and yet there are invisible forces at play of like, well, actually, I don't really want to have to do this extra 5 things, so I'm happy with the less good outcome, right? And that's how change works all the time. Like whether it's you want to get up 5 minutes earlier or half an hour earlier to work out in the morning, or whether you want to massively disrupt an industry, it's the same human behavior principles at the base of it, right? And I think the better we get at recognizing those underworkings of what's going on and using that for good, the easier it's going to be to make the shifts we need to make. Because marketers understand this stuff. It's not that we don't know, right? They
All
can
right.
get you to buy any new flavor of Doritos they pump out.
And they pumped out a few
They
weird ones.
have, and you're like, really? Huh? And people are like, yeah, there's new Doritos, and you're like, okay, but kale, right? So,
I love a good kale chip.
yeah, it says a lot
Um,
about our society when these are the things that we spend the marketing dollars on.
did you try the wasabi Doritos?
No, there were wasabi Doritos.
Oh, for a minute, yeah.
Uh,
Like I
I
don't
must have
remember
missed
when or
it.
where, but
I was probably abroad at the time because I missed out on a chunk of time. Like there's a whole bunch of movies I haven't seen from that one time period too because I just didn't have access. Really, it was
yeah.
it was pre streaming everything on the internet time when I was living abroad. So back in my day,
Well,
I got my cane out for a second. Sorry, like I was actually just cleaning my email inbox out the other day, and I was like, God, this is from like 2010. Some of these emails, which says a lot about how well I keep up my inbox.
I
But it was
haven't
like I'm
deleted
looking at people used to
emails.
send fun photos and jokes via email. Do you remember doing that? Like, who would do that now? We don't do that.
It took me a long time to even understand chat rooms. I
Yeah.
just was like, I don't want to sit in front of a computer and just type to a stranger. This
Right?
is
Weird.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't get it. And then they started doing like the solitaire, or you could play like games in those chat
Yes.
rooms. And so I had a few friends like we'd play Scrabble or something. But like I'm still even today, like I'm not just gonna get on Facebook and just start messaging somebody and just have some hour long typing conversation back and forth. It's just
Yeah.
call me.
Yeah. And like people don't like that anymore though. They're like, why did you call me before texting? Or like, oh,
I
I
love
didn't
doing that to people
I
though.
know, right?
I love it.
This is gonna be like our like 80 something year old trick. This is how we're gonna harass our grandchildren. It's just gonna randomly be like, haha. Just
Like I
call
have
them.
this couple friends that are just like, no, I don't text, I just call them. And if I miss the call, I don't leave a message. They'll see that I called, they'll call me back. Right? Or they'll text me like, can't talk right now, I'll call you in a little bit.
Yeah. Things have
Right.
changed
But
so much though, right? Like, cause I have an 11-year-old, she's about to be 12 here in a week or so. And we were talking about, I said something about in the 90s, right? Which is apparently a very long time ago now, but in the 90s, not everybody had cell phones. Oh, I remember what it was. She keeps not taking her phone to school. She's supposed to have it because she gets herself to and from school just in case like she gets a flat tire or whatever she needs help. And she never takes it. She's only ever on it to go like on YouTube or something, which she's not supposed to be doing. Like the point of a phone is to communicate. And she was like, no. I'm like, yeah, that's what they're for. And then I ended up telling her, like, when I was a kid, like, if you weren't home, people couldn't get a hold of you, like that's how that worked. Like
yeah,
now
they're
the luxuries are supposed to be able to get a hold of you when you're not home, but you don't have your phone. So you're living in the 90s. And she was like, That's terrible. So she took her phone to school all week this week. Just took the right messaging, like.
Right. You just had to finagle it in just the right way that it was her choice.
Totally. So, but yeah, I mean, things have changed a lot, right? And things move quickly too.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I used to have to dial with a circle. There was a circle, and then you
wait for it. God forbid you screwed it up at like the 6th number, right? You were like, no.
Hang it up, do it all over again. Dial tones. People don't even know what a dial tone is. Be like, what's a dial tone?
Or a busy signal, right? Like
or a busy signal.
We called somewhere and the phone made a busy signal noise, and she was like, what is that? And I was like, oh God, it's a busy signal. You've never heard that before. She's like, ew, no. She literally said, ew, no. And I was like, okay.
All right. Making me feel great.
I know, huh? So, yeah.
Dial-up internet. If she didn't like that sound, she would have hated AOL.
Oh, for real, right? She's appalled by these things we used to live with.
When I was a kid, my dad built computers. So 1985, like when clone PCs came out and Windows came out and VCRs were around and camcorders were around, and I would sit with my dad in his office and there was a computer there and the VCR was there. And I was like, man, somehow, this is like in 1985, somehow how do I get the video from my camcorder into that computer thing to like put like in backgrounds and stuff, right? And I thought about that as like a 7-year-old child.
Yeah. And here we are. You're just like, you can just like do this and it goes to the thing you wanted to go to, right? Like,
yeah, like if I had the power of Adobe, like when I was a kid, man, and YouTube, so jealous. Like, but now that's over, right?
Wasted on the young.
Wasted on the young. Now there's so much of it. It's just like, no, well, that's just what we do.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, but I think it gives us a lot of tools, right? Like tools to do better disruption of systems we don't like, because we can actually reach each other from a bigger distance. Like you could find a bunch of people in any country you wanted to and change something there by interacting, or you could play chess with somebody in Singapore, today, right now, you could just do that. So there's so much possibility, I think, to improve and impact some of this stuff. And I think food's a great way to do it, right?
It is. On the subject though, how the hell did we survive the 80s and the 90s? How did we get places? How did we even live? And we lived through it, but I still looking back, I'm like, how
it is a mystery, isn't it? And I think about the autonomy that I had as a kid, that kids don't have these days. We had buses, like you got on a school bus and the bus took you to school, and my school was 45 minutes away because I lived in rural Massachusetts. And so, it was not a fun ride, and the buses didn't really have heat, and it was like you had to like drive around all the Hilltown neighborhoods to pick up the 5 other kids that lived there. And it's like there was like several hours a day where I was just on a bus. I was just on a bus, right? And my kid's like, it's windy. I don't really want to ride my bike the half a mile to school today. And I'm like, just go. Like, you can do it. Yeah.
Let me tell you, when I was a kid, I had to walk 30 feet to the bus and then be on that bus for an hour and a half.
Right.
And after school,
stand outside
back on that bus for
an
hour and a half. My great grandmother really did tell those stories though. Like we walked 3 miles in the snow, no shoes on,
uphill, both ways, right?
Both ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's cute. So. But yeah, we did changing the world one meal at a time.
Yeah, that's a great. That should be your new tagline for.
It's a new tagline. It's all about choices. So make your choices in the moment, right?
It is, and you have power, right? You have control over the choices that you make. You may not have control over what choices are available to you at the moment, but by consistently making better and better choices, you're going to change the landscape of the choices available to you.
It's like voting with your dollar.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only, I think, thing we can all agree on is still good about capitalism is that I actually
Right.
I do get to choose, right? Like, and I'm starting to see.
I buy free range eggs when I buy eggs. I
Yeah.
buy the most expensive goddamn eggs in the grocery store.
Yeah, I do it out of principle now because it's like, I'm gonna buy these eggs because I want them to eventually get cheaper.
Yeah, I'm supporting this company. I'm supporting this
Right.
company. This company does the
Yeah.
thing that I appreciate. I will spend the money
Yeah.
on that company because that's how we vote with our dollars.
It is. It is.
It's
Or,
like,
don't
it's like
participate.
or
Right?
don't.
Don't
Right?
buy those eggs. Get some chickens. Like, get some chickens
Okay, there you
and
go.
have some chickens. Or, and obviously not everybody can have chickens, but it's almost everybody can have a small garden somewhere on a roof, out a window. You can grow something.
You can do a little bit,
You
unless
can
you
do
have
a
a
little
brown
bit.
thumb.
I do, though.
I do.
Everybody,
I can't grow shit.
I literally
We've
planted
killed so many
broccoli.
houseplants. People give us houseplants for like presents and like
It's a death
no,
sentence.
I'm just
Forget
gonna
it.
kill it.
Well, houseplants I can do, right? I've got houseplants, but it's the outside plants. Like if they don't
Oh,
have like a organized irrigation system, they're done for.
no, I can't even keep the houseplant alive.
But
And
I'm
there's
gonna
two
keep
of us.
trying.
We're both bad at it.
I'm gonna keep
Jordan will
trying
be-
though.
Jordan will be like, did you water that plant? I'll be like, oh my god, that plant!
There's a plant.
I forgot we even had that thing.
Oh,
I think they're all dead right now, so it's fine.
yeah.
Would you like to give any shout outs?
A shout out. Let's see.
Where can I follow you? Where can we learn more from Coach Kris Wilkins?
Well, so we met actually through another podcast that I'm a part of. I collaborate with another coach on a couple of different podcasts, but we each have our own as well. So if you want to hear more about what coaching today actually sounds like, I have a podcast called Deconstructing Health and Fitness. You can find it on any of the regular podcasting apps, and it's mostly a client's journey. Someone was open and willing to be vulnerable and share her journey through health and fitness with the world. And so it's our coaching process, and you get to hear what it's really like, and that it's not a straightforward linear process of like, I give her some sparkling gem of information and she wanders away better and just never ever looks back. Like, that's not what coaching is. Coaching is being with somebody in the challenges and helping them find small actions they can take, and standing with them sometimes when there isn't an action they can take, and just being there. Yeah. And then the other part of the podcast is about interviewing other people in health and fitness about some of the things that we're working on changing to better serve the people that we are trying to help. Yeah. So kind of taking mainstream fitness and giving it a good shake.
Shake it up, darling. Shake it up. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, keep shaking it up. And thank you so much for hanging out with me.
Yeah, this is really fun. Thanks for having me.
Insightful as always. And if you get a chance, definitely see if the kid wants to cook some kale, because
yes, definitely.
I want to know if she gets crazy with kale. I'm all about I kale about everybody.
You love the kale. You kale about everybody. That's fine. She won't eat leaves. That's her thing.
No?
She won't eat any leaves of any kind. She'll eat every other vegetable, but if it's a leaf, she's
No
like,
leaves.
no, it's not for me. So
That's a leaf, Mom.
it is. She's like you. Much like rotary phones. She feels the same way about rotary phones as she feels about kale.
Right. Right before we leave, did you see the video of the kids trying to use the rotary phone?
No.
There's a TikTok of a dad who, like, the kids want something. They're like, all right, if you can make a phone call with this phone, you can have it.
No.
And they can't figure it out. It's fucking great.
I will go Google that. I will have to go find that.
Ladies and gentlemen, please go check out Coach Kris Wilkins. She's a fantastic lady, and she will help you with your health and fitness needs. Go watch my television series, and if you can, go check out Taste Made and follow Beyond the Check on the Makers Forum, and you can hang out with us next time. Awesome.
Awesome.
Kris, cheers.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Rock and roll. Bye.